Thank you very much. Which mic am I working on? Both of them, okay. My name is Akiho Shibata, Professor of International Law at Kobe University in Japan. And I'm also directing a center, a new center, Polar Cooperation Research Center at Kobe University, which does both Arctic and Antarctic legal and policy studies. And if any of you are interested in pursuing your polar legal studies in Japan, Kobe might be a good destination for you to pursue that study. As you can see, I am probably the only and the first and only a lawyer in Antarctica attached to the Japanese Antarctic expedition. So you will see many photos from my experience in Antarctica from 2017. So my talk might be a little bit boring, but at least photos will be interesting for you. Okay, and before I start, I would like to thank the organizers and professors, and especially my friend Luis for inviting me here to give this talk to the distinguished audience today. And this is my first visit to Chile, and it is my honor to give my experience and thoughts on Antarctic Treaty System to you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Okay, just to get a sense of where Japan is, and I actually found out that the Chile from Japan is further away than from Japan to Antarctica. More specifically, the Showa station. This is the Japanese Antarctic station in the East Antarctic area. So, however, Japan has a long history with Antarctica. In 1912, a Japanese retired lieutenant, Nobu Shirase. You can see the photo of Shirase here. You can see how different we were today. Very lightly worn by me, but Shirase with all the fur and all that. So he was the first Asian to actually reach Antarctica in the Ross Sea region into 1912. But Japan or Japanese nationals, they did not do anything other than the Shirase into 1912. But in 1919, Japan became the original four principal and allied powers of the League of Nations, the Council. So this is when Japan has become a powerful state in the international community. In 1930, the Japanese government made an explicit statement regarding its policy with regard to Antarctica. The Japanese government explained a private expedition by Shirase, not approved by the Japanese government, the state, is not capable for territorial claim. So in 1930 already, Japan has made its clear policy that we would not claim a territory in Antarctica, and instead, just very similar to the United States position, that we would not acknowledge the territorial claims by the other countries made to the Antarctica. But at the same time, around 1930s and 40s, just before the World War II, there were Japanese whaling vessels very active in the Antarctic waters. So Japan has had an interest in Antarctica in 1930s and 40s. But again, in 1939, Japan made its position clear that it rejects any territorial claims by other nations. And if there were to be any negotiation of the future of Antarctica, Japan reserves its right to voice its position based on the discovery of its national and real interest, meaning willing interest in Antarctica. So very similar to the United States, Japan becoming a powerful state in the international community. So you see how you balance the interest, whether it's better to claim a part of Antarctica and to recognize the other territorial claims, or make the Antarctica all available for you to access it. So Japan chose the latter position already in 1930s, just before the war. However, as you know, Japan went to the World War II, and we lost, and we became a very weak state in 1945. And so Japan lost its status in the international community, but at the same time, there are other Asian countries who became prominent in the international community. The first, in 1945, when the United Nations was established, China became, instead of Japan, the permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. But of course, at that time, it was Taiwanese government who represented China at the time. On the other hand, in 1951, Japan, with the other allied countries, concluded a peace treaty, and in its Article 2, Paragraph E, Japan renounced all rights and title and interest in Antarctica. So this is when we actually lost all the interest and possible claims to the Antarctica because of the peace treaty in 1951. And of course, Chile was one of the contracting party to the peace treaty with Japan. However, Japan was very interested in scientific activities in the international community, and in 1956 to 1958, during the International Geophysical Year, IGY, Japan made its best effort to participate in this scientific activity. And Japan was the only Asian country to establish a base station in Antarctica to participate in this IGY activity. So Japan, instead of the militarily powerful state, becoming a scientific state, and it had an interest in Antarctica by establishing a base, scientific base in Antarctica. And it is actually the Showa Station, the same exact place where we established in 1957. So we just commemorated 60th year of the Showa Station in 2017, when I was actually at the Showa Station. And because of the Japanese participation in the IGY, Japan was invited by the United States to the Washington Conference to negotiate and adopt the Antarctic Treaty. And Japan became one of the 12 original parties. Again, Japan was the only Asian country to become an original party to the Antarctic Treaty. Looking at the international society in 1971 to 72, you have now the mainland China being represented at the United Nations, and the U.S. and China relations was normalized during this time. So you see China becoming a part of the international community, the mainland China. In 1970s, in the Antarctic Treaty context, there were discussions on mineral resources, and the fishery regimes were being negotiated by the 12 consultative parties at the time. But because of the fisheries interest, we invited Poland to become a consultative party in 1977, and at the time West Germany and East Germany to become a consultative parties in 1981. So you see the developing interest of the other parties, and we, including Japan, being original consultative parties, invited those interested parties to come on board on the system of the Antarctic treaty. So there are other Asian countries involved in the Antarctic Treaty context. In 1982, as Julia has mentioned a little bit in her talk, Malaysia, one of the very important country for the developing countries, that we call it G77 and China group. So Malaysia, representing the G77 countries, raised the issue of question of Antarctica in the United Nations General Assembly. And Malaysia argued the Antarctic resources, especially the mineral resources, should be considered as common heritage of mankind, and mineral resource regime must be negotiated in the United Nations rather than in the 15 or 16 consultative parties under the Antarctic Treaty. When that kind of issue was raised in the United Nations, the consultative parties tried to expand its group by inviting, for example, Brazil to become a consultative party in 1983, India, an Asian country, in 1983, China in 1985, this is the mainland China, of course, and South Korea in 1989. And at that time, the requirement to become a consultative party in the Antarctic Treaty system was to establish a station in Antarctica. So you have to be capable scientifically to go to Antarctica and establish a station there.